Hello, and welcome to Cultural Diversity Training. Before we begin, please make sure that you complete your test at the end of the training, and you'll turn that into your Pathways Family Specialist, where they will score it, add it to your file, and provide a certificate for the completion of the training. Today, we're going to be talking about Cultural Diversity Training. This is a training provided by NTDC, the National Training Development Curriculum. As we get started today, there we go. We're going to look at an introduction to cultural diversity. So we're going to look at a person's identity, and that's going to evolve throughout their life, with much of their identity developing during childhood and adolescence as a result of their culture and the people they connect with. The identity of the child you'll be fostering or adopting will have been impacted by their race, ethnicity, and culture, as well as the people they have connected with in their past. Part of your job as a parent will be to reinforce their identity and self-worth by supporting the child in their cultural identity. This training focuses on the importance of identity, culture, and the importance of cultural humility. We'll start with a broad-ranging whole group discussion about cultural and identity. So let's look at identity and what that entails. Identity is who we are. In some cultures, I is a capital letter because of the importance we place on our sense of an individual self. In other cultures, identity may be perceived more collectively, such as being a member of a family or group. As an important part of identity becomes the definition of who we are as a person and what we stand for in life. Identity begins to form very early in life. Some examples might be children learning gender and skin color differences by preschool age. Identity continues to evolve and broaden over time with more experiences, with more intensity in adolescence. A big part of our identity comes from the people we are connected to, both biologically and emotionally, and from life experiences in total. Now let's think about what sorts of things play a role in our sense of identity. If we were to list things on a chart, if we were in a classroom setting, some things that form our identity is our name, our family stories and history, family values, and maybe immigration stories. As a foster or foster adopt parent that is bringing a child into your home that you may have no previous relationship with, we may know very little about their previous family history. As a kinship caregiver, you're fortunate enough to pass on a lot of those different types of stories and where their name may have derived from a great grandparent, an aunt or uncle, or a maiden name as a middle name. We're able to pass down those family stories and histories and those different values that we may have that we pass down from generation to generation within our family. And we have those cultural stories to pass along. One that brings to mind for myself, my great grandfather was a warden at the Walls Unit in Huntsville, Texas. And that's, if any of you may know, that's where death row is. And my great grandmother wanted new bedroom furniture. And so my great grandfather said, that's wonderful. You can have bedroom furniture as soon as you get a job. And so she did. She sat with the first woman ever on death row. She would sit at nighttime on suicide watch. And that's how the money she earned for her new bedroom suit that is now in the guest bedroom of my parents' home. So we have those stories that we can pass down from generation to generation. So it's important as a foster adopt family that we maybe try to connect with parents during those family visits so that we can get those stories and we can tell our children those things as they grow when they may have those questions about their family history. So we kind of identified some of the things that help form our identity. Of course, our families and friends and our cultures are key. Additionally, a big part of our identity is developed through experiences or messages that we receive. They can be subtle or obvious messages that we get from others. It can be one time or over a period of time. They could be more positive, like a child being a successful student, or it could be more negative. Personally, I'm a terrible singer. Unfortunately, children who have experienced trauma, separation, or loss have often received more negative than positive messages about who they are. Sometimes a person doesn't even have to experience the negativity directly. However, hearing stories from their family or community can impact their personal identity. When painful memories are passed on from a family's past, this process is known as intergenerational trauma. There's an article that we can provide to you that gives you a little more understanding in that intergenerational trauma. When a whole people have experienced an atrocity as an oppressed group, this is known as historical trauma. The things we could think of is maybe slavery or the Holocaust. And those are stories that are passed down from generation to generation. Culture plays an important role in all of these factors that help form the identity. In the next slides, we're going to define culture in some related terms. We've been discussing the world around children as a strong influence on how they identify, how their identity will develop. So culture is one of the most profound influences because it surrounds children all of the time and in many different ways. Today, we're going to spend some time talking about how to support children with their cultural backgrounds and develop identities. And in the parenting and racially, culturally different, diverse families training, we'll continue our discussion on race, culture, as they relate to fostering and adopting children. There's many ways we can define culture. One definition is here from the Cambridge Dictionary, which is the way of life of a particular people, especially as shown in their ordinary behavior or habits, their attitudes towards each other, their moral and religious beliefs, and their arts that represent their traditions, such as literature, art, music, dance, and theater. So what else might we add to this? Well, in this training, we're going to refer to ethnic and racial cultures, as well as the range of cultures in children and families' lives, including economic backgrounds like poverty or sexual orientation or gender identity. This training focuses on an overall culture. While it touches on race, it doesn't focus on race, racism, or related issues. In addition to individual experiences with people, shared cultural experiences will significantly impact the identity of a developing child. For example, most cultures have rites of passage as a child moves from childhood to an adulthood. So kind of think about your childhood and growing up, and what were some of those rites of passages that you may have experienced in your family? And what would that rite of passage be that you want to pass down to your children? So some things that I can think of coming of age could be getting your first job, graduating high school, getting your driver's license. That was a big deal for me growing up. But it can also be religious quinceañeras, bar or bat mitzvahs in Judaism, baptisms. There's a variety of things. The first time maybe your parents, if you grew up in a family that hunts, the first time you were allowed as a child to go by yourself hunting, where they trusted you to make those decisions. So those could be coming of age rites of passage, depending on what your family values were and your experiences growing up. Because of what these represent, they help children to feel more mature, capable, and ready to take on the next steps in their lives. How a child perceives their family and immediate community's culture is critical to developing their identity. And then also, it's important to realize that how others view the person's culture. And all the ways that we've defined is eventually also taken in by the person. And that outside view also becomes a part of their identity. The combination can allow for a positive sense or belonging and pride. So we're going to look a little bit at the isms here. It's important to be aware that many have been, let me rephrase this again. It's important to be aware that there are many that have ways that children have, that you'll be caring for and their families might have experienced forces like classism, racism, heterosexism, discrimination, power and privilege differences that have impacted their identity. It will be more important for adults around them to be able to acknowledge, address, and help buffer the effects of any of isms that the child you are fostering or adopting might be facing. So we'll talk about these over the next couple of slides. First, we're going to reflect on self-worth. A person's culture and identity will impact not only how a person views themselves, but also how they feel about themselves. As you might remember from previous slides or trainings that you may have attended, we reflect a lot on self-worth. As you now know, children who have experienced separation, loss, and trauma have already had many hits to their feelings of self-worth. So it's important that their self-worth and corresponding behaviors, it can be very valuable to help them to feel a sense of pride and belonging. One powerful way to do this is to connect them to their culture of origin or other cultures they feel like they belong to. And pathways or within the foster care system, with your pathways family specialist, once every quarter or once every 6 months, they will sit down with you and review the child's plan of service. And this is where or the treatment plan. This is where we're going to sit down and put together a lot of those things on how we maintain the child's culture, race, ethnicity, and religion. So you'll see when we do or say nothing about the child's culture, the result is not neutral. We unknowingly run the risk of sending the message that their culture is not okay with us, and therefore that they as a person are not okay with us. So getting to know and understand more about the child's culture and that of their family is a meaningful task for the parents who will be fostering or adopting, and you'll likely need some extra skills to do that. It's also important that you're able to express appreciation for diversity and other worldviews. So let's talk about these skills. The first is cultural responsiveness. For this class, we're going to describe learning from another and acting respectfully as being culturally responsive. An example might be showing interest by asking a child and or their parents about holiday traditions from their family and also incorporating the child's traditions into your family. This is another way we can learn to appreciate diversity and other worldviews. You'll often find that traditions are influenced by their cultural heritage. And then here we have cultural competence. For this class, effectively interacting with people from other cultures is known as cultural competence. And the example we were just using, cultural competence could be incorporating these holiday traditions into your family while the child is living with you. And then we have cultural humility. For this class, remaining aware that we will never have all the answers of any given person's culture, and knowing that our life experiences will always impact our understanding is called cultural humility. Initiating these kinds of conversations and being open and respectful shows cultural humility. Cultural competence, cultural responsiveness, and cultural humility are a powerful combination of tools for parents who will be fostering and adopting. Now, if you look on Wikipedia, cultural humility is different from other culturally based training ideals because it focuses on self-humility rather than achieving a state of knowledge or awareness. The term cultural humility was coined in the physical healthcare field in the late 1990s and was adapted for therapists and caseworkers to increase the quality of their interactions with their clients and community members. So, quick vocabulary quiz. You love them as a child. So really quickly, let's look through these definitions. This is one of your test questions. Recapping what these definitions are is culture. Culture is the way of life of a particular people, especially as shown in the ordinary behavior and habits, their attitudes towards each other, and their moral and religious beliefs, and the arts that represent their traditions, such as literature, art, music, dance, and theater. Culturally responsive is learning from another and acting respectfully. Cultural competence is effectively interacting with people from other cultures. Cultural humility is remaining aware that we will never have all the answers of any given person's culture, and knowing that our life experiences will always impact our understanding. Different cultures also often give rise to different experiences and expectations, and that can cause cultural clashes. So we'll talk about those in the next sections. Uh, Cultures that we're a part of shape our views and expectations about everything around us. As we all know, human beings have a natural bias towards things that we're familiar with because it's more comfortable. When cultures collide, there's often a first instinct to distance or judge. But a culture clash can also be an opportunity to bring people closer together as they work to understand one another. It's important that parents who are fostering or adopting have the ability to be self aware and self reflective, as well as the ability and flexibility. Adaptability and flexibility. Sorry about that. So, really quickly, here's a little short clip we're going to watch. Um, Uh, so it's from Instant Family. If you've never watched Instant Family, I would encourage it. It is a comedy, has Mark Wahlberg, but it even though it is a comedy, it has a lot of realistic behaviors and emotions that you will encounter as a foster or adoptive parent. So really quickly, we're going to watch this short clip about these kids opening their presents and how it's a little bit different in terms of culture. Oops, wait 1 second. I forgot I got to turn the sound on. Share the sound rather. Okay. Okay. Um, so when we watch that thing, that clip there in that scene, how do you think their different cultures possibly affected what happened? Now, some of that is kids. Kids love boxes. I know I did as kids. You can make forts out of them and all of those different types of those things as well. But while we don't want to make assumptions, one possibility is that children had grown up experiencing a more impoverished environment and not been able to have as many toys, while the parents had the expectations that extra special toys were what holiday gifts should be. There's nothing wrong or right in a situation like that, and it's a fantastic opportunity for parents to exercise cultural humility. Rather than being upset or thinking or saying that children are not grateful, adults can remain aware of what their experiences and expectations are, how those may be different from the child or their family, and how that can impact the parenting and message that they send to the child and the families, and even families. In a case like this with a child, if the parent pauses to consider that they may instead choose to use it as a moment of play and connect with the child, and eventually they'll get to the chance to introduce the new toys and play with them too. Uh, when a parent and child have different cultural backgrounds, they're likely to have cultural clashes. So cultural humility is critical in handling them well and using them to build connections within the family. In the next section, we're going to talk a little bit about building that cultural humility. And again, just to kind of reemphasize, birthdays and Christmases or those holidays sometimes are very tough for children. Think about grief and loss. There's a lot of powerful emotions there that are happening within that child. They miss their family, they wish they were there, and so there's other things going on there as well. So we have to be empathetic to those emotions that they may be experiencing at that time. Uh, so as children get older, you might be able to talk more in depth about their culture and developing identities. These conversations may not always be easy, and you may not always know how to support them, especially if they're expressing things that are uncomfortable for you. Yet it will be critical to support them, and they will likely be hoping for more than just words. They're looking for your actions as well. So we're going to practice how to have some conversations with children about their culture and developing identities. So to get us thinking, here are a few ways that teens have shared that help them to feel like adults are not only hearing them, but also affirming who they are. So as we're having those conversations, we want to stay engaged in the conversation by simply listening. Sometimes children are not looking for feedback. They just need to vent their frustrations. No different than you as a foster adopt, or kinship caregiver. When our family specialist comes to your home, sometimes that's the only person you may have to vent to about that truly understands how the system works and the flaws within the systems and the judicial systems and state regulations and how hard it is sometimes to keep up with all of the rules, minimum standards. So you're not looking for feedback from us. You just need that person to vent and validate your feelings. Sometimes that's what the kids are doing too. So stay engaged in the conversation just simply by listening. Stay open to explorations rather than trying to guide them. Listen for understanding rather than support your own conclusions. Look at what the child is doing right in the situation, not what's wrong with them or it. Engage and affirm rather than trying to fix or change. Tolerate some degree of discomfort when you're deeply listening. And then be able to accept not having closure after a conversation. So as you can see from those tips, help older children feel like they truly have their back, and it is a thoughtful, active process. The step beyond just giving verbal support is called being an ally. Being an ally is more powerful than support because it's an active process that goes beyond making it okay for a child to explore an identity or culture on their own, but one where the adult stands beside the child each step of the journey to claim a particular identity. Allying includes acknowledging their feelings and experiences, brainstorming possible actions and plans, and keeping your attitude open, language affirming, and the child as a priority. This active adult participation results in a tremendous sense of belonging, freedom, and pride for the child, which is hugely impactful for the overall well-being. Allying with children and teens also majorly builds the relationship with the adult who is willing to go there with them. Let's see. There are challenging situations for children to navigate on their own. It's critical that you learn how to be an ally for children and be supportive of their culture. And that's, again, one reason why we do review those in the child's treatment plan that is placed in your home, so we can maintain that culture. It's important to say exactly the perfect thing, and it's not important. Sorry about that. It's not important to say exactly the perfect thing in these conversations. Just remember that it's important to affirm the child's feelings and provide support to the child in dealing with the challenges before them. The goal of parents' interactions with the child is to free the child to be themselves and to emerge feeling strong and proud of who they are. Now, quick quiz. True false. I'm going to call these out. Just kind of think about them as I'm talking through them. How parents can help a child feel more included in their home, particularly children who may have different cultural backgrounds than you or your family. It'll give you a few minutes to kind of process as we're going through these. Now, kinship families, it's a little bit different because these children are related to you. So many times they do have the same culture, religion, ethnicity, and those things that we can maintain and that we're aware of. So here we go. Let me call out a couple of these questions. We'll see if you think they're true or false. Children living in your home should be asked what traditions they use to celebrate holidays or special events, and use some or all of those at your holiday and special events. And that would be true. We want to incorporate that child's past history. A child can't do all of the changing when they come into your home. We have to be able to do a little bit of that changing and help incorporate those things as well. You're in charge of shopping for food and meal planning. So children should adapt to the foods you make, and you should not have to provide what they are used to eating, as it's it's not something that you usually prepare. False. We would want to make sure that we include that child's preferences into your meal planning. Ask that child What are some of their favorite foods? We're showing value to them, and we incorporate that into their meal planning. If that child has a cultural background of a food that you may not necessarily know how to prepare, instead of cooking it for them, maybe on a Friday evening or Saturday or Sunday, the weekend, we go out to a restaurant that prepares those types of meals. I may not be able to make tamales because I don't understand, the process, and I'm a horrible cook to begin with. But man, I love to eat them, and I know lots of restaurants that have really good tamales. So we could do that and incorporate that into the child's life. If their child speaks another language, the parent should not allow this language to be spoken or listened to in their home. False. We want to encourage and incorporate that the best that we can. Let's say the child speaks Spanish, you have no knowledge of Spanish, but encourage that child to listen to music that may be in Spanish, Spanish speaking television stations or movies, and talking to others in that same language. We don't want them to lose that. Learning simple recipes from the family's culture and buying a few spices or sauces from their background could go a long way in helping a child feeling more comfortable in your home. True. It's going to make them feel valued, and they're going to feel bonding and connecting to you because you do value. You're showing value to them. You don't like the music the child you're fostering, adopting is used to listening to, so you should not allow them to play it anywhere in the home. False. Now music that is sexually explicit or has inappropriate language, definitely, that's a boundary issue, but not something like a music that we're just unfamiliar with because we don't necessarily care for the tones in it or things like that. And tones, I mean musically, not the words, but we should still encourage them to listen to that. Talking to children about where they came from will bring your family closer together. True. A great time to do this is dinner time. When we're all sitting around the table, have them share those stories. You're showing, again, value to that child and interest in them. Being around people who look, talk, dress, act, and eat like those from the child's background is not healthy. False. Let's say we do have a child in your home that is of a different race, religion, culture, ethnicity. One thing that we can do if we live in a community that may not be as culturally diverse, especially for that child, is we can choose their healthcare providers. Let's choose a doctor that is the same race, ethnicity as the child, culture, or religion, their dentist, their therapist. If this child has medical needs, is a medically fragile child, we could choose their home healthcare staff. If you have a child in your home, let's say that identifies with Christianity, and that may not be your religious preference, one way we can encourage that is allowing them to listen to Christian music or watching Joel Osteen on a Sunday morning. Those are different types of ways that we can incorporate that into your home or into the child's life. So we also have different federal laws that impact our children in care. Give me 1 second as I move this through to where I want it to be. So on your test, this is going to be your last couple of questions about like the Indian Child Welfare Act, the Multi-Ethnic Placement Act, Family Preservation and Services Act, is where we're going to look at where those test questions come from. Let's see.
Ongoing concerns. The Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act of 1974, also known as CAPTA, was the first major federal legislation addressing child abuse and neglect. This act provided federal funds directly to the individual states. To qualify for this support, states established child abuse reporting procedures and investigation systems. The Indian Child Welfare Act, also known as ICWA, was passed in response to concern about the high number of American Indian and Alaskan Native children being removed from their families and placed outside of their communities. Research began to emerge in the 1970s that highlighted the negative effects of temporary placement and lack of a permanent family. Interest was raised about the number of children who were entering the child welfare system and moving from one home to the next. This was labeled foster care drift and became a driving concern of the child welfare system. The 1980s was the decade where the rights of families became more important. Strengthening families was recognized as the paramount way of meeting the needs of children. In-home services became more common, and family preservation services were given stronger emphasis. During this time, there was a growing number of children entering the child welfare system, and children were spending longer periods of time within the system. Questions arose. Were children being removed unnecessarily? And was there enough emphasis on reuniting children with their parents? The passage of the Adoption Assistance in Child Welfare Act of 1980 formalized casework practices designed to assure permanency for children. This was the first time that adoptions were subsidized, recognizing the importance of keeping children in a stable home environment outside of the child welfare system. By the early to mid-90s, the number of children in foster care was growing dramatically. Rates of re-entry into care were rising, and many children were in care for more than 2 years, raising concerns about the effectiveness of foster care. There were also concerns that children were coming into care needlessly. Many believed that more children could go home or achieve permanency if the right services were provided. At the same time, the system was experiencing large caseloads and high levels of turnover in staff and foster parents. The 1997 Adoption and Safe Families Act, or ASFA, marked the first time issues related to permanency were explicitly stated in legislation. This legislation effectively changed the landscape of child welfare practice. The new law connected safety with permanency by demonstrating how each factor was necessary in achieving overall child well-being. ASFA also required that foster parents be given notice of and an opportunity to be heard in any review or hearing to be held with respect to the foster child. As we neared the year 2000, child welfare policy veered between protecting children and preserving families, and keeping children out of the child welfare system when possible. The Fostering Connections to Success and Increasing Adoptions Act amended the Social Security Act to improve outcomes for children in foster care. It connected children with relative caregivers and supported those connections by offering incentives for adoption. Fostering Connections enhanced services for youth who were aging out of care, and it created new programs to help children in foster care, as well as those who were at risk of entering the system. It helped those children to reconnect with family members. The Family First Prevention Services Act of 2018 is intended to provide more resources for families in crisis to stay together. It also places limits on federal funds for putting foster youth into congregate care placements like group homes. The Act also includes several other child welfare-related updates to federal policy and has an emphasis on preventing children from entering the child welfare system and getting them home as soon as possible. In reviewing the history of the child welfare system, it is important to remember that there are 3 layers of responsibility for child welfare services: federal laws, state laws, and administrative procedures. Each of these layers contain guidelines for doing the hard work of child welfare. It lays out a path that cases follow while the child is involved in the system. All of these laws, policies, and procedures build the framework of the child welfare system and the services provided to children and families within the system.
Okay, so that, guys, concludes cultural diversity. Hopefully you were able to answer all of those questions on your test as we review that material. Again, please make sure to turn those tests. Remember, it is 1 test per per person. So you want to turn that into your Pathways Family Specialist. They will upload that to your file, provide a certificate with it so that you can get the hours of credit. If you have any questions, we always want to refer you to your Pathways Family Specialist first, as well as their direct supervisor, because they're more experienced in understanding your family's needs, the child that is placed in your home, and circumstances. For overall general questions about cultural diversity, you can also reach out to me for any questions or comments. S. Batson, SBATSON, at pathway.org. I hope you enjoyed today's training and that it heightened your horizons on the different types of diversity and including children into your home environment. Again, hopefully you have a great rest of your day, and we'll be seeing you again. Thanks so much for joining.